Story 1. Stranded on a couple's camping vacation. The story behind my murdered friends began with one bad idea. Have you ever felt like you just needed to get away? Maybe just away from your cell phone, or away from social media, away from the hashtags and blogs and BuzzFeed articles and bullshit online arguments, away from the godforsaken, constantly rotating cycle of notifications and news feed alerts commanding our eyeballs' attention every useless second of every wasted day. Needless to say, the idea of a couple's vacation in the woods injected a spark into 6 very dull and unlucky lives. Hindsight is invincible. I know now that we should not have stayed. My wife and I spent most our daylight hours at work. We filled our spare time with overtime. That almost felt like a requirement. We paid high rent in a little city too shitty and crowded to fit our future plans of having kids. The stress of that fact weighed heavily on us both. My buddy, Kyle, and his wife Casey were stuck in the same situation. Our friend Stacy worked as a lawyer. She just started dating a new girl, but never could find the time to see her. Veronica had never even met the group. We all needed to get unstuck, so to say. The camping trip seemed like the perfect excuse to just, you guessed it, get away. Casey read about the grounds in one of those online blog sites. You know, the type that claims to list the top 10 most romantic places in the world. She had been in my wife's ear about it for the better part of the past 2 months. I can still hear Casey's obnoxious Brooklyn accent piercing through the speakerphone in our uncomfortably crowded one-bedroom loft a week before we left. Look at the list again, Em. Number 2 is only a 3-hour drive away. I swear. It's beautiful. So secluded and stuff. We gotta do it. Come on, girl. I need a vacation. Kai is driving me friggin' crazy. That voice drove me nuts. Most tri-state kids lose the remnants of their parents' accent sometime around the teenage years. But not Casey. She squealed the emphases to each uncomfortable syllable like she was stuck underwater. She was also one of those people that needed to simplify every name down to 2 letters. Call it my biggest pet peeve. I swear the girl would have called me Ma instead of Matt if given the chance. Kyle messaged me about the trip a couple days later. We gotta go. My job is killing me, man. I need to take some time off. If I stay at home, Casey will make me do work around the house. This is the compromise. It can't be that bad. We can go fishing and drink beers. What's the worst that could happen? I caved the next morning. The rest is forensic history. Casey and Emily booked the only 3 cabins available. The lodge offered a group discount for 6. We were psyched to have the place to ourselves for 3 days. Finally, after so many years of being trapped in the disgusting city life, I felt finally ready to break free and see some trees. All 6 of us stuffed into Veronica's minivan. We left on a Friday afternoon. Our plans were to unpack before nightfall, check in, and crack open a couple of drinks to kick-start the weekend. The trip took 6 hours. Kyle made sure to point out the inaccuracy of his wife's prediction several trips. I chortled along with him in the back seat, but kept my big mouth shut in order to avoid a bigger fight. Happy wife, happy life. Look, I didn't know about the storm, okay? Who could have predicted this traffic? In Casey's defense, that part was true. Nobody could have predicted the storm and the traffic that came with it. All 6 of us watched the weather forecast the previous night and decided to still give the trip a try. Nevertheless, 20% chance of rain turned into 100 shortly after we crossed state lines. The streets started to flood a little bit sometime around 9. After a miserable trip, we arrived to an empty parking lot outside the campgrounds right around 11 o'clock at night. Our small group tumbled out of the minivan with a gaggle of groans like kids stuck in a clown car. Okay guys, 3 keys, 3 cabins. Maybe we can get changed and meet at the fire pit. Most of the group ignored Emily's opening statement. Kyle tumbled out of the car and hustled away into the woods to stretch his long legs. Stacy cuddled up to Veronica as they looked longingly at the dimly lit cabins. Casey was the only one to match my wife's pace. As always, sounds good. Let's get a move on, meet back in 5. I need a fucking drink. I welcomed the excitement. Casey was good for some things. She cheered Emily up for one, and each couple seemed to come alive a little bit at the thought of some alcohol. I held the case of beers over my head like a trophy as we trekked to the cabin. Stacy and Veronica chuckled at my stupidity as Kyle lumbered reluctantly back towards his own door. "Oh my God, Matt, get in here. This place is beautiful," my wife soon exclaimed from inside. She was right. Our cabin consisted of a gorgeously overstuffed king-sized bed, decorated with a plush red blanket, heaps of fluffy pillows, and an assortment of crimson-colored candies placed evenly on top. A coffee maker on the dresser stood ready next to a deluxe mirror and decadent wooden armoire. The phone looked like something from a century ago, but everything else seemed to fit the utmost expectations of luxury. "I can't believe we got all of this for so cheap," Emily shrieked happily as she whisked away into the bathroom. I saw bits and pieces of a rustic bathtub and expensive graphite countertop behind her before she slammed the door. "It's beautiful. I gotta pee," she squealed. I smiled to myself again and began unloading our beers into a convenient little refrigerator under the nightstand. The trip started to shape up in my mind at that point. I felt excited for the first time all day. Kyle ruined that moment when he shouted for our attention outside. "Guys, get out here! Guys, get out here!" The seriousness in his voice caused me to get up quickly. I smacked my head on the edge of the nightstand and stumbled for a moment. My wife called out from inside the bathroom somewhere around the same time. "Matt!" "Great. 2 problems. 1 SEC bug. Going to check what Kyle is yelling about." I opened the door to find Stacy and Veronica by his side in the spitting rain. They were yelling about something, but it was hard to hear in the storm. I threw the hood over my jacket and rushed out to greet them. The girls looked dumbfounded as Kyle shouted and pointed towards the woods. "I heard him over there." I walked up and tried a joke to ease the tension. "You guys start drinking already?" Veronica turned to look at me with a frightened look on her already tear-stained face. The fear in her eyes told me that something was truly wrong for the first time. Someone slashed Veronica's tires. 4 simple words changed the entire evening. I tried to rationalize the situation in my head. Maybe the tires got cut while we were driving. Maybe it was an accident or a rogue piece of glass. I asked how the fuck this could have happened, and Kyle started to answer, just as Emily marched outside and shoved a waterlogged piece of paper in front of my eyes. My reply to my wife probably seems a little shorter than it should have been. "What is it?" "What?" "Veronica's tires just got cut." Emily stared at me blankly. She paused. She looked at the sagging minivan. Then she started to sob a little bit. "I found this letter. I thought it could be a greeting or something nice from the owner, but it's not. It's horrible. Listen." My wife mumbled the creepy poem softly, with an absolutely trembling tone. 6 souls went into the wide wild woods all on their own. Each bore gruesome sins that needed to be atoned. 3 days later, only 2 came home, both covered in blood, bile, and bits of bone. We need to get out of here. That letter is not funny. My slashed tires are not funny. None of this is fucking funny, and it cannot be a prank. I want to go home. I want to go home right now because I barely know you people." Veronica's shrill and hysterical voice went unanswered. The rest of our group stared at the disabled minivan in dumbfounded silence. My cell phone listed 0 bars of service. The rain made the local road in front of us mostly mud. The nearest town was nearly 50 miles away, a fact we were all so fond of just 15 minutes ago. There is something disturbing about the way wind moves through trees on a September evening. Dead leaves drift aimlessly in the breeze, branches drift and crack at the seams, and even the most suspicious sounds could end up being nowhere near as sinister as they seem. I trained my ear to listen to the different sounds, hoping to hear someone, anyone, running away. I heard nothing. Kyle stepped forward and walked towards the driver's side door of the car. "What are you doing?" Veronica asked him. Kyle paused and looked at all of us. "Nobody has a cell signal, right?" We shook our heads. "Me neither. We won't get one. This is the middle of nowhere. Our best shot at getting home is driving out of here." Stacy spoke up as she wrapped her arm around Casey's shuttering frame. "What about the tires?" Kyle lifted himself into car seat and hooted happily as the engine rolled over immediately. "You can still drive on slashed tires. It won't be fast, but..." Hope rose up in my chest. He slammed the car door behind him and pushed the gas pedal hard. The wheels spun out and spit out some mud a bit. The van lurched forward. Unfortunately, forward was the wrong direction. The car landed in a ditch that left us in a much worse situation than the one we started with. Kyle opened the door to a line of death stares from all 4 ladies. He asked me to help push. I decided we should try something else. "Look, man, this is pointless. Even if we make it some distance, we'll probably just get stuck again, and we'll have nowhere to stay. The cabins have locks. Maybe we should just wait until morning. We'll sleep in the same room and someone can keep watch." The group nodded in unison. Kyle stared at me angrily. Then he looked back at the car and at his wife. Finally, he relented after muttering one prickly comment sent in my direction. "Fine. But I'm not sleeping tonight. Somebody has to look after the girls." Veronica did not like that one. "Thanks. Perfectly capable of protecting ourselves. Good job with the van, Muscles." Kyle's face turned an uncomfortable flush of red. He shot back a few comments. After another few minutes arguing in the rain, we ultimately decided to stay in mine and Emily's cabin, for no other reason than the fact that one was closest to the car. Once inside the safety of the cabin, we stayed up for a couple hours. Kyle and I looked out the window. Veronica and Stacy whispered quietly in the corner. Casey and Emily tried to rationalize the situation. "I really think it had to be glass. That kind of thing happens all the time. Remember when a rock on the parkway cracked your windshield, Matt?" I nodded in her direction as Kyle continued to glare. The attitude started to piss me off. This trip was equally his idea, as much as anyone else's. I suddenly had no desire to stay up and listen to his bitching. I joined my wife in our corner of the king bed and let myself fall asleep to the sounds of my friends' dozing voices. I woke up again shortly after 4 in the morning. My eyes were caked with crust from falling asleep with my contacts, but I looked around the room and saw a few familiar faces. Veronica and Stacy were lying together on the floor. Emily curled up against my back and snored quietly. Casey snagged another corner of the bed. I rubbed my eyes and realized the idiot of the night was missing. Kyle. I thought about alerting everyone in the cabin. No one seemed to have noticed him gone, but the probability that Kyle went outside to try with the car again seemed pretty high. I got out of bed quietly, tiptoed my way towards the door, and stepped into the drizzling night. It was quiet. The rain slamming against leaves and the roof of the cabin overwhelmed my senses. The car stayed in the same place. The other rooms remained locked. Everything seemed to be the way we left it. Then the sound of a whinnying horse in the distance broke the cool sounds of nature. My fear turned back into hope. "Hello!" I called out Kyle's name a few more times while searching the area. I could think of only one other place he could have went. The woods. I knew it would be stupid to venture too far in. In fact, I almost got cold feet before ever making it past the tree line, but a light 100 feet in caught my attention. I thought it could be a cell phone. "Kyle!" Nobody answered. I approached the light with the utmost caution. I called out to it continuously, but nobody answered. The panic started to build inside me. It had to be a cell phone, but what was it doing out here? Why was the light still on? When I found the answer to my questions, I promptly vomited in the bushes. The phone was still attached to a hand. That hand stayed attached to an arm. I found a second arm about 20 feet away. The next morning, we found 2 legs, each about a half-mile from my location. As a horse whinnied again somewhere in the distance, the puzzle picture became disgustingly clear. None of us would be safe here. My best friend Kyle believed in God. He believed in life after death. We talked about it more than a few times, usually over a few killed bottles of wine. The concept of faith stayed instilled in him from a very young age. He went to church every week. He memorized all of the masses in Latin, just like his dad, Dale. One day, he hoped to be a priest or a deacon, or whichever one could still marry and fuck his wife. Kyle preached a merciful God, an understanding one, a God that would of course welcome the likes of our notably gay best friend. I don't think he ever planned on being drawn and quartered for his alleged sins. The shock eventually settled in my stomach. That disgusted pit of vomit and bile got replaced by panic. I don't know when that happened. I could not think clearly. I could not see clearly. Shapes in the trees started to merge and meld with the darkness, and I questioned them all. I stared at my former best friend's severed arm for what must have been an hour, and wondered what the fuck could have cut him apart like that. Somewhere around that time, it became clear. The 4 limbs, the letter, the animal sounds I heard in the woods all started to add up. I read about it in history class. First, the victim is drawn. Each limb is tied to 4 separate horses. Then they are quartered. Some sick fuck shouts go, and the horses run in different directions. I found the center of my friend's poor corpse closer to our cabin. That confirmed my theory. I never found his head. Kyle's Radiohead shirt stayed attached to his middle piece throughout the attack. The tattered cloth covered the gruesome severing that had caused small pools of blood to settle in around all 4 corners of his body. Maybe it was the shock of that image, or the confirmation of Kyle's death. But that moment finally triggered my fight-or-flight reflex. I ran back towards the cabin. Trees whipped me in the face. I heard shapes in the woods following me, but that only made me run faster. I just wanted to see my wife. The rain commingled with my tears, and I didn't care. When I got to the cabin, I banged on the door and begged the girls to wake the fuck up. Stacy was the first one to open up. I didn't give her a chance to ask what happened. Kyle's dead. Drawn. Quartered. His arms are everywhere. Legs too. Radiohead shirt covered the worst. Help me. Help. Help. A tiny voice called out from inside the cabin. What are you talking about? I tried to explain the situation to Casey as clearly as I could. My voice stumbled over itself 100 times. She ended up sobbing uncontrollably while Veronica screamed at me to speak clearly. Stacy ignored all of this and looked for something in her bag. When she found it, she shoved the long object in the butt of her jeans and tried to push past me. "Is that a gun?" I asked. "Someone has to protect us," she replied. Veronica, Casey, and Emily turned their anger towards Stacy. They shouted at her as she exited the cabin and walked outside with a giant rifle at her side. "Stacy, you can't go out there. I heard someone." She ignored me. Stacy blew through the door and pounded her way out into the parking lot. I followed her as the rest of our group screamed from the threshold in the cabin. When we got near the car, Stacy took a long look through the scope of her rifle, then turned to me with surprise. "I see a light." That was the last thing she said. A bullet zipped through the trees. It caught a couple leaves on the way. Then the round caught Stacy in her pretty little head and popped it like a pimple. Bits of my friend's blood and brains covered my face. Before I even had a chance to scream, the gunfire continued. I saw Casey go down in a heap by the doorway. I saw Veronica run towards my side and reach for the gun before another round caught her in the face. Emily. Thank God, she retreated back into the cabin and locked the door. An unknown, gruff voice called out from somewhere in the woods. "Got the whores and the adulterer. They look just like their Facebook pictures. 2 left." The voice gave me his location. That was stupid. The adrenaline coursed through my veins as I picked up the rifle. I do not know a lot about guns, but I have been to a few firing ranges. I know how to shoot, I know how to aim, and I know how to get lucky. As the ricocheting bullets dissipated, I crouched behind our minivan and aimed into the woods. When I saw a flash of that same torchlight, I fired. The voice in the woods called out again. "Brian's hit. You fucking murderers." I didn't wait to find out more. A few bullets whizzed past my head as I ran back to the cabin and pulled Emily out. She was hysterical. I wrapped my hands around my wife as she tried to fight me and go back into the safety of the cabin. When I got her back outside, we ran. We ran for what felt like hours. We never looked back. I don't know if they gave up on looking for us, or if they followed, or if they just decided to stay true to the words of their sick little poem. We found a road somewhere along the way. I can clearly remember describing the situation to the first car we encountered. Part of me felt like it could be the gunman, but when the Good Samaritan pulled out his phone and called the police, I finally collapsed from exhaustion in his back seat. Asterisk. The cops searched every inch of those woods. They did not find any of my friends. For a while, Em and I were suspects in the disappearance. Eventually, it was determined that our gun fired only 1 round, making that theory less likely. We tried to go back to our normal lives. Our cramped city apartment suddenly felt safe and secured. We bought 3 extra locks. We keep each of them tied at every hour of the day. We deleted our social media accounts. I figured that was how they found out about our pasts. My sense of security changed shortly before I began writing this story to you. On Saturday, we got a letter in the mail. The format feels familiar. The chicken scratch is similar to the first. It is considered by the police to be the first contact in 2 years. 2 souls went into the pretty little city all on their own. They have read the signs shown in this poem, but the man in a high window has too perfect a view of the street below. One cloudy day, one just won't make it home. Story 2. My vacation in DR, which lead to creepy shit. This is going to be a fairly long story. Alright, this happened in 2010, summer. I was going into my 10th grade year. My dad just got in contact with his mom, personal issues. So why not I get to know her a little better by taking a trip with her to Dr. My father is Dominican, and his mom barely speaks English, and I barely spoke Spanish, so the language barrier was kind of fucking us up. Anyway, she put me in a house with a few of my cousins, while she lived a few blocks down. Basically, I was allowed to explore this island for myself with no repercussions, because she let me do whatever the fuck I wanted. Cool grandmother, her. So the whole time I was there, I lived in Santo Domingo. This is the capital of Doctor. Occasionally we take trips to other sections of the island to see friends, other family, etc. It's only about a good 4.5 hours to get from one side to the other. One specific weekend, my cousins wanted to go to Santiago. This was my first time in DR, so I was like, fuck it, I'll tag along. The drive was fairly long, but the transition from city area to just forest, palm trees, and thick brush was very beautiful. We didn't get to Santiago till about Friday night. By the way, there was 5 of us. Me, Joseph, Rubino, Jonathan, and Yenia. Anyway, we stay in this cabin, literally in the middle of fucking nowhere, surrounded by just forest. The nearest anything I'd say was a good 4 to 5 miles. It was about 10 p.m. Everyone was relaxing when my cousin, Joseph, starts to tell us about this thing called the Galipote. Like we have a Bigfoot, Chupacabra, etc. They have their myths. I instantly called bullshit because I don't tend to believe in stuff like this. The Galipote is said to be a man that sold his soul to the devil that can shape-shift into any animal it wants. They usually terrorize people and cause mischief and whatnot, but the most evil forms, according to my cousin, are said to be in the form of donkeys and horses. Plus they only live in forest-like areas, like where I was staying. Anyway, after he got done educating me on this bullshit, I called it a night. It was going on around midnight when I went to bed. I wake up at 3 a.m. to take a late-night piss, go do my thing, and proceed to walk down the hallway. The way the cabin was built, it had 1 story, but it was like a long ranch. But it had a fair amount of windows, so you'd be able to see whatever was around you, like a 360 view. So I'm walking down the hallway, and pass one of the largest windows in the house by the front. This is where things got creepy. I shit the mud, fuck not, I see a horse staring dead at me at the edge of the woods. Literally, this thing was staring at me, almost through me. It didn't even move. I swear it was just standing there doing nothing. At this point I couldn't have pissed myself since I just pissed, but I rubbed my eyes thinking I was being just delusional since it was so late. I wasn't. It was still staring at me. I bolted down the hallway to the room I shared with Jonathan and looked at the same spot, and it's fucking gone. I wake up Jonathan and tell him about what I just saw. Obviously he's skeptical about the situation and gets up to look with me. We go back to the same spot, and not only is the damn horse back, but it's closer to the cabin than it was before. At this point I was like, fuck it. Red alert, everyone needs to get the hell up. I wake up the rest of the household, and everyone comes to the spot to see nothing. I think, well shit, not only do I look stupid, but everyone is probably super pissed. That's when I heard a shriek. This shriek, it's giving me chills thinking about it, sounded like a mixture of a cat and a horse. Everyone heard it. Everyone freaked out. I ran to our room and looked out the window to find the horse at the edge of the woods again. Now I remember this like the back of my hand. I could only see half the body of it, which were the front 2 legs of it. The horse was literally levitating. This horse, before my eyes, it suspended in the air. What the fuck do I do? Oh, that's right. Damn near shit myself. Everyone else saw this too. The horse backed into the woods and didn't come back for the rest of the night. How do I know this? I stayed up till the sun came up, staring out the window. Nothing else happened. The following morning we packed our shit and left. No one mentioned a thing when we got back because we were supposed to stay the weekend. We just said we ended it short because we didn't have a lot of supplies. We all know what we saw. That's the first time I went to DR, and I definitely want to go back again. But to that area? Fuck no. I'll stay in the capital, where the chances of seeing levitating horses are extremely low.